Chicago Tonight, Latino Voices is made possible in part by Allstate and the Searle Funds at the Chicago Community Trust, and by the support of these donors.
Good evening and welcome to Chicago Tonight, Latino Voices. I'm Marissa Parra, reporter with CBS 2 Chicago. Thank you for sharing part of your weekend with us. Here's what's on the show tonight. On this Earth Day weekend, in a special crossover edition of Voices, we take a look at how activist organizations across Chicago and Illinois are fighting to protect their neighborhoods from the effects of industrial pollution. Plus, workers at the El Milagro tortilla factory have been asking for more fair working conditions. We'll get an update from an employee and labor rights organization, Arise Chicago. And teens find new ways to tell their own stories at local library branches this week. And the Mexican tradition of printmaking is alive and well at a Chicago printing press run by a retired public school teacher. First off tonight in Chicago, when it comes to industrial pollution, it's often the Latino and Black communities who bear the brunt. And nowhere has that been more evident than Chicago's southeast side, where after a 2-year battle, environmental justice advocates fought metal shredding company General Iron and succeeded when the city denied them a permit in their neighborhood. But past industrial abuses still cast a shadow, with the air, water, and soil pollution resulting in higher rates of asthma, cancer, lead poisoning, and other health issues. Joining us now as part of a special crossover discussion with Chicago Tonight Black Voices are Eduardo Flores, a member of Clean Power Lake County Steering Committee; Cheryl Johnson, Executive Director of People for Community Recovery; Isis Bazaldua, a community co-founder of Bridges Puentes Justice Collective of the Southeast; and Naomi Davis, founder and CEO of Blacks in Green. Thank you all for joining us tonight. Isis, to you first. Your organization is part of a coalition who fought to deny that permit to General Iron we were just talking about. So can you first tell us, why was it so important to keep General Iron out of the southeast side?
It was important to keep General Iron out of the southeast side due to the fact that it would be located by an elementary school, a high school, residential area, and a commercial plaza. But as well as General Iron was known to have 2 explosions of a metal shredder that they were planning to bring without refixing it over to this community area and increase the industrial pollution that we currently have.
And we talk about how this impacts people of color, especially Black and Latino Chicagoans. Is that something that you were finding here as well?
Yes, in the community of the southeast side, we had a battle with Petcoke, and then a battle with S.H. Bell, and then General Iron, all within the span of 2 decades, which isn't a lot.
Now, Eddie, we've talked about these inequities, but they're not just limited to the city. Can you tell us a little bit about the situation in suburban communities where your organization is currently running?
Yeah, a lot of the issues that impact communities of color in Chicago are impacting communities all over the state, such as Waukegan, which is where we focus most of our work. And we just want to highlight that a lot of the issues are happening all over the state. It's not just Chicago. And for us, sometimes it's kind of harder because we have to make sure we're speaking up so that we're not forgotten.
And in the suburbs, are you seeing that it's impacting people of color as well, maybe disproportionately so?
Yeah, so the main area in Lake County where the pollution happens is the Waukegan, North Chicago, Zion area, whereas the rest of the county is more white predominant. And so the fact that we see all these issues concentrated in that Waukegan area, whereas the rest of the county doesn't have to face these, we can directly see that communities of color, Hispanics, Black communities are affected.
Eddie, thank you. Cheryl Johnson, to you now. We obviously couldn't let this segment go without pointing out that environmental activism runs in your family, starting with your mother, Hazel Johnson, often called the mother of environmental justice. She had her organization, People for Community Recovery. And since her fight to clean up pollution at Altgeld Gardens that began in the 1980s, tell me, how much progress would you say has or has not been made towards environmental justice in Black and brown communities here in the city?
Well, there have been a lot of policies that have been implemented, but the problematic comes in is not being enforced. And that's the biggest challenge that we have as local community is the enforcement and the opportunity to even know what's going on in your community. The right to regress against an industry coming in your community is not a process. It's just the fact that the state of Illinois never denied a permit for any of the industries in the state of Illinois. And you have to remember, we live in an industrialized district area of the United States. So we've been polluted since the 1860s, but it's time to change those problematic problems that we all experience in our communities.
And obviously, given the fact that you are sort of picking up where your mother left off, you feel like the fight isn't over?
No, I guess it would never be over as long as that we have environmental racism in this country. You know, racism look like me. I live in public housing. I have a low income. And the fact that my community is apolitical and the land is cheap in my area defines if I'm going to live in a healthy community or not. Those are the inequities and just the bias that goes on with many of the industries and government in this city is responsible for many of the environmental harms that we have to experience every day in our life. And that's not fair. Just like General Ryan, that was in Lincoln Park. Now they want to come to the southeast side of Chicago. That's the classic example of environmental racism in the city of Chicago.
Naomi Davis, I want to turn to you now. Often this is set up as a battle between economic development, jobs, and then the environment. Do you feel like those two things are incompatible? Is there a way forward?
Absolutely, there's a way forward. I mean, we've been working at the intersection of environment and economy since we were born 15 years ago. And the idea that there is this new green economy with an aging infrastructure and so much pollution to be cleaned up, that means that there are decades of good paying green jobs, enterprises that Black communities can be cultivating inside of our sustainable square mile, where we believe that Black communities should be able to walk to work, walk to shop, walk to learn, and walk to play. We're actually building an energy economy. And the idea that we can have weatherization that is fundamental to even being able to enjoy some of these energy efficiency technologies, clean energy technologies. Can't have any of that with a leaky envelope. Where are the roofers? Where are the tuck pointers? Where are the air duct sealers? Where are the HERS raters? All of these are a pipeline of workers and enterprises that we are cultivating because we can and because we must, but we deserve to have the financing, the funding, the trillions that are circling must be drawn down by the states and distributed equitably. And equitably in these terms means prioritizing Black and brown communities.
Oh, Isis, I want to turn to you now. Beyond denying permits to polluting industries, do you think that industries who have, made past environmental abuses, do you think that there's something that should be done beyond that when it comes to righting those wrongs?
Yes, I do. We have land in the southeast side that is unusable, inhabitable, and if we were to dig it up in any way, would put more pollution than safety. And I believe that these companies need to find a way to clean the hazardous area and the hazardous waste that they had put into this community because it's unfair to leave it onto the people who do not have these magnificent resources of income to clean up these areas and find a way to fix their wrongs, as we have been doing for decades and ages.
Okay, last question for you, Eddie. When we talk about government being held accountable, what role does local government play in holding polluting industries accountable?
Yeah, government holds a very important role. The people who we elect in office are there to represent the communities. They're there to represent the people living in these communities, and they need to fight, side with the community members and fight against these corporations that will, if not stop, they will literally try to do as much as they can to exploit our communities, our Black and brown communities, and just, leave their mess. From such a young age, we're taught, clean up your mess, clean up after yourself. And so the fact that these corporations can come in, make their money, and then once they no longer want to, or once they're no longer profitable, they just leave our communities with a mess. The government needs to step in and enforce and ensure, protect people's backs and protect our communities.
Protecting communities. That is where we're going to have to leave it for right now. But first, a note to our viewers. Don't forget to tune in to Chicago Tonight Black Voices for more of this expanded conversation, including how pollution disproportionately impacts the health of both Black and Latino children compared to their white counterparts. And now, our thanks to Eduardo Flores, Cheryl Johnson, Isis Bazaldua, and Naomi Davis.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you for having us.
Up next, the latest on organizing efforts by workers at a local tortilla factory. Workers at El Milagro tortilla factories are declaring some victories. They say they've seen wage increases totaling more than $1 million this month, in addition to finally getting air conditioning in their lunchrooms. In a statement to the Chicago Tribune, a company representative says the raises were not the result of activism efforts, but that they are listening to workers and more changes may soon be on the way. You may remember the workers made national headlines last fall when they rallied at headquarters to protest what they say was a lack of COVID protections, unfair wages, and even sexual harassment. But along with their advocates at Arise Chicago, the workers say the fight is far from over. Here's El Milagro employee Alfredo Martinez.
No nos quieren dar, o sea, no, parece que no nos sienten dignos de sentarnos con ellos. O su forma de ser es simplemente escuchar lo que dice la gente por ahí, pero no conversar directamente con nosotros los empleados. Pues básicamente ha sido bastante la ayuda que nos ha dado el RISE. Ha cambiado muchas cosas de los que estaba pasando, pero todavía nos hacen falta algunas otras cosas. Nos sentimos bien por la ayuda, pero estamos peleando por algo más que nos hace falta.
Joining us now with an update is Laura Garza, the Worker Center Director with Arise Chicago. And Laura, as Alfredo just said in Spanish, he said while they've made some progress on some of their demands, that the work is not done. Can you tell us a little bit about where they've advanced and where they feel like they still need progress?
Well, yes, thank you for having me today. Well, first of all, the workers, as you know, organized almost 7 months ago. And the reasons that El Milagro actually gave them the raises back in September and all the way through December, which they recently just received another increase in December of 36 cents across the board, was because the workers organized collectively. And so they made a huge impact on El Milagro owners to making their demands and ensuring that they did something about the wages. As you know, during the pandemic, there's been a lot of conversations about a shortage of workers, but what we've been saying is really a shortage of good wages and good benefits for workers in general. In addition to them receiving the increases, they also ended the unlawful practice of a 7-day work week. Workers reported for 10 years that they were actually working 7 days straight without a day off. They also finally After years of not having any anti-sexual harassment training for managers and workers, they implemented those trainings in December, along with the workers no longer being asked to pay for their own tools to fix the machines for El Milagro. So it has been because of their organizing that we've seen, the improvements of working conditions, and the demands that the workers had 6 months ago were actually were met early on, and there's still some pending issues that the workers are still fighting for.
So I'm curious, what's your reaction to the statement that they gave to the Tribune then, saying that this was as a result of listening to the employees instead of labor action?
Well, let's be clear. The workers had been going to Milagro for some months prior to coming to Rise Chicago, and it wasn't until the workers organized and handed in their first demand letters that the increases went into effect, and they actually started listening to the workers, particularly in the summertime. I think, as you recall, during their campaign, the issue of air conditioning was deplorable. I mean, people were not able to work in the extreme heat that they were having, and it was because the workers organized that El Milagro began to make those changes. Prior to that, they had not done any of that. In addition to that, the workers filed, charges with the Office of Labor Standards and Odrisa, and demanded they stop violating the sick day ordinance and also the Fair Work Week ordinance, which, by the way, continues to be an issue. And workers are still organizing around the fact that they're being deducted hours on a date notice without giving any proper notice as the law requires, which is a 2-week notice when they're changing their hours.
Okay, so with where things stand right now, how likely is it, you think, that we could see a boycott amongst workers?
Well, let me be really clear. The workers have not supported a boycott. That they never called for a boycott. They did organize. They did have a labor stoppage for 1 day. The community actually supported them by not buying some of the products, but the workers never asked for that. And what the workers want is simply for El Milagro to continue to have a process that's fair for all workers, that they address the working conditions, and that they stop violating any labor laws in the state of Illinois or any federal laws for that matter. And so it looks to me that El Milagro, while they have not met with the workers, they have implemented changes, and that's a good thing, and that's what workers want to see. But they also want to see a permanent change that is not just because they had to organize and activate themselves to demand it. They want to see permanent solutions that El Milagro is going to take on moving forward.
Okay. Laura, Southside Weekly reported that workers at other local tortillerias are now beginning to organize as well. Have you heard about this? What do you know about this?
Well, just recently, we were contacted about 6 weeks ago from workers from Authentic Foods, who is, the company Ranchero and La Guadalupana are staples in the Mexican community, where they make tostadas and tamales and chips. And so workers were inspired by the activism that Milagro workers, and what they saw on the news and what they read and what they saw on Facebook. And so they said, well, if those workers could do it, we can too. So those workers organized, they made their demands, and Authentic responded. Unfortunately, they did fire 2 workers, and there has been charges against Authentic on that issue. And they're going to win that fight. I guarantee you they're going to win that fight because they fired them illegally. But the workers are motivated. They're no longer taking, the abusive working conditions that they have dealt with for years. I think the pandemic really, they had enough. I mean, they were working in conditions that were not safe. They saw coworkers die, or coworkers get sick. And I think, again, and Milagro workers have been an inspiration for workers right now who are contacting us in the last several months.
Well, Laura Garza, we understand the fight continues. Our thanks.
Thank you.
Up next, to look at an annual event organized by teenagers for teenagers. Stay with us. The 7th annual Chai Teen Lit Fest is heading back to the stacks for an in-person event this week after 2 years of virtual celebrations. The all-genre storytelling festival, created for and by teenagers, runs throughout this week via a series of programs, workshops, and events at local branches of the Chicago Public Library. It includes everything from learning how to make your own zine to a mystery improv game to conversations with authors, podcasters, and even some local musicians. Chicago teen librarian Marshall Call says the event offers Chicago's teens the tools they need to tell their stories in their own ways.
One thing that I think is amazing about Shy Teen Lit Fest is that it's a literary festival for teens by teens. But it's not just about literature, it's not just about reading, it's about storytelling and being able to tell a story through different avenues, different formats. You can tell a story by crocheting, you can tell a story through artwork, you can tell a story through a pizza if you have to, right? But like there's a story to tell. And I think that's what makes it very appealing. And I think that's what teens have taken away from that. Like they can design this program any way they want by telling a story. And I think that's what makes the libraries now a little bit more exciting. And also with Shy Teen Lit Fest as well, that we tend to want to give our teens the opportunity to engage and also to have their voice be heard.
Love that. You can head to our website for a complete list of events and registration information, all things Shy Teen Lit Fest. Plus, a Chicago public school teacher took an early retirement to pursue his dream to continue in the long line of Mexican artists in the world of printmaking. From depicting calaveras, the skulls seen in the Day of the Dead celebration, to pursuing themes of social justice, Rene Arcello is the heir apparent to an enduring tradition. Last year, arts producer Mark Vitale shared this portrait of a Chicagoan who's recommitted himself to his art and to his culture. We'll take another look.
When we visited his studio in pre-pandemic days, he was working alone, but this artist has a talent for collaboration.
I'm Rene Arcello. I'm a printmaker. I have collaborative place which is called Arcello Press, where I publish prints with artists from not only across the United States but from different parts of the world. There's somebody from Costa Rica, from Puerto Rico, Canada, in Spain and France. There's several South American artists that are living in the United States that have collaborated. Some Venezuelan, Argentinian, Peruvian.
From lino cuts and silk screens to wood engravings and etchings, printmakers need a wide range of skill sets. We first learned about Chicago's Arcello Press when the Bridgeport Art Center hosted an exhibit of work by Rene Arcello and the artists he works with. That show was called The Border Crossed Us. Arcello grew up in a small town near Guadalajara. He told us the story of his own border crossing in 1979 when, as a 19-year-old, he left Mexico and came to the U.S. His family hired a coyote to guide him, his brother, and a cousin.
I remember going through from Tijuana. There was a coyote that took a group of us in the middle of the night. It was probably around 2, 3 o'clock in the morning. We crossed the border. We saw some of the helicopters flying overhead, and down the hill we saw several groups that were being caught. We just stayed put there until, for a few hours, I don't remember how long, until there were no more helicopters flying around. And then our group leader took us and we were walking, I don't know for how long, until sunrise practically. And then after that afternoon, they put us in the trunk of a car, a big car. I think there were 5 or 6 of us. And from there they took us out, passed us through a checkpoint. And then from there, we went to the outskirts of Los Angeles. I feel lucky. And then I also have been able to make something of myself while coming to the States.
Arcello came to Chicago, married, and became a U.S. citizen. He studied at the School of the Art Institute and worked at what later became the National Museum of Mexican Art. And he taught at a Chicago elementary school for 20 years through the beginning of the pandemic.
We did do virtual teaching for a few months, actually. It was a lot more difficult because most of the kids were not getting connected. A lot of them didn't have, because we're talking about Humboldt Park, didn't have devices, didn't have access to the internet, so it was very difficult.
For years, he had been planning to retire to focus on his art. His work is part of the heritage of Mexican printmaking that started with the artist José Guadalupe Posada in the late 1800s, including works that feature calaveras.
And also the use of the skeletons that are doing a lot of different things, not in the bloody, spooky way like Halloween, but they are doing regular activities as if they were alive, because to us it is an extension of life, and it is what remains of this body once we die.
Arcello's artistic output is very much alive. While his early works were more political, his latest artwork concentrates on people. One is a tribute to the first responders to COVID-19 and includes a bat taking flight.
I've been able to get my artwork out there. At the same time, I continue to produce every day. I'm very happy that I'm able to do that. So essentially just getting ready until the pandemic is over so that I can do more dispersing of my work through exhibitions and collaborations with other artists as well.
For Chicago Tonight, this is Mark Vitale.
If you felt inspired, you can buy Rene Arcello's original works on his Etsy shop. They go for anywhere between $25 and $300. And if you want to read about his works of art, well, a book of his works is now available for purchase. You can find out more, you can see a little bit more of his work by going to our website. And that's our show for this weekend. Be sure to check out our website, WTTW.com/news, for the very latest from WTTW News. And if you're watching us on Saturday night, know that you can also catch Latino Voices and Black Voices on Sundays beginning at 10 p.m. You can catch my reporting on CBS 2 Chicago. I'll be right back here in the host chair next week. And now for all of us here at Chicago Tonight, Latino Voices, I'm Marissa Parra. Thank you for sharing part of your weekend with us. Stay healthy, stay safe, y buenas noches.
Closed captioning is made possible by Robert A. Clifford and Clifford Law Offices, a Chicago personal injury and wrongful death firm that's proud to serve its community through pro bono legal services.